Okay, welcome guys to our economics 10A lecture. I greet you all and hope you had a wonderful afternoon and a wonderful Friday. So what we want to do, guys, for these lectures is we want to make sure that they are as interactive as possible so that you gain the best that you can from this. So there are two approaches that we are going to take. The first approach is I'm going to give you the material that you need to know for economics. So I've gone through your study module and I've seen that your lecturer prefers asking questions than actually writing information in the study modules. So the information that is not in the study modules is what I'm going to provide you with. However, what I would also want us to do is either at the end of this specific lesson or maybe after each lesson that we do, the next session that we also do, maybe after one or two lessons, then we can have a session where we just go through the various questions that are in your study module, sort of as a revision to see if you guys are capturing some of the concepts that I am teaching you. And also, it will help you also make sure that you're also studying on your part. You're not just listening, but you're also regurgitating what we are talking about and gaining more information from it. So these revisions, we can either do them at the end of a lecture, or we can set up a separate time after maybe one or two lectures, after we complete a topic, then we can go through the study module and see what type of questions that the lecturer is asking in the study module. Also, as we go through, maybe after 3 or 4 lectures, we'll also go through some of the assignment questions so that you can also prepare for your assignment. I understand it's due on the 12th, if I'm not mistaken, of April. If it's earlier, you can advise me if it's earlier, but I think it's on the 12th of April. So I think maybe mid-March, after about 2 or 3 lectures, we'll actually go through the majority of the assignment. Then the remaining part of the assignment, we'll go through it at the end, I think early April, when we have done most of the material. But like I said, what is important in what we are going to do is, number one, I'm going to give you the material. This is the purpose of the videos. Then number two, we are going to set aside some time to go through the various questions, whether they're in the assignment or they're in the study module, just explaining to you guys and also you guys trying to attempt them so that you can see where you are at, so that if there are any areas that need further clarification, we can just make sure that we clarify those areas. But I'm a very free person. If there is anything that you think this area, look, James, you covered this area well, can you just repeat that? Can you just put it in another way? I am more than willing to do that for you guys, because you paid your monies, and I just want to make sure that you get what is worth what you paid for. So thank you guys for joining in. For today, we are going to do an introduction to economics. I think I've already covered most of what we are going to do today in the free lecture, but I'm just going to repeat some of the concepts in case you did not attend the free lectures. And also, we are going to go through some of the questions that are in the study module, just to see if we've actually captured some of these concepts. So please, when we get to the questions part, please be free to attempt the questions. There's no wrong answer. We are learning as students, so be free to attempt the questions that we will go through, so that you can see, you can gauge. So I'm going to start the lecture now. So sorry, I'm going to mute you. But if there are any issues, you can just raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself and ask as I go through the lecture. Okay. Right. So we are going to go through microeconomics, that is your economics 10A. So like I said, I've covered some of this stuff. So if you've gone through the video, some of it might be repetition, but repetition is always good because it emphasizes, because the introductory part of economics is also very important because it sets the ground for whatever we are going to cover next. So the first thing you need to know about economics is the definition of what economics is all about. So you may be asked in an examination question, what is economics, or define economics in a single sentence or something like that. So economics, the first definition we can talk about is that it is the study of trade-offs, or it is the study of the choices that we make because of scarcity or because of the limited nature of the resources that exist within an economy. So in other words, we can say also that economics is the study of the human behavior, because a choice is human behavior. So it's the study or a social science. Some refer to it as a social science, because there's what we call natural sciences and there's what we call social sciences. So natural sciences are your physics, your experiments that you do, but your social sciences refer to the study of human behavior. So economics is a social science because it studies choices, it studies trade-offs, it studies human behavior. So economics can also be defined as the study of human behavior, or the relationship that exists, the study of human behavior in the context of the relationship that exists between two things. So there are two issues here. That is very, very important. That is key. There are two aspects of economics, the reason why we study economics. On one end, they are what we call unlimited wants. So they are what we call wants and needs, but what is unlimited is our wants. So on one end, there is unlimited wants, and then on the other hand, there is scarcity, or scarcity arises from limited resources. That is where scarcity is going to come from. We're going to define scarcity separately at a different platform. But for now, you need to know that economics is about two specific things: unlimited wants and scarcity. That's what economics is all about. The choices that we make as individuals is because there is scarcity, there is limitations that are there, but we have unlimited ones. And now we're going to define the various aspects of that specific definition. So what are wants? What are needs? What is demand? So you may be asked questions that are in relation to those three specific things: wants, needs, and demands. Remember, we said wants are unlimited. That is very, very important. But there are three issues here. There are wants, needs, and demand. So what we call a need is basically a necessity that you have as an individual. For example, I need shelter. That's a necessity. I need food. That is a necessity. I need clothing to cover me. That is a necessity. So that is what is called a need. But a want, on the other hand, it's not necessarily a need. In economics, we usually say that a want is the form in which a need may take. So the need that I have is food, because I need to eat. But a want can be a McDonald's burger, a KFC burger, maybe some food from a French restaurant, or some exotic cuisine. So that's now a want. It is unlimited in nature. But food in itself is just a need. I need food. But a want, on the other hand, it can be very, very obscure. As much as I need shelter, I need a house. But I can tell you, I want a house in Durban on the beachfront. That's what I want. So there is that distinction that should be there. The want is the form the need will take, but the need is the necessity part. But a want, on the other hand, it might not be a necessity. Having a house in Durban is not a necessity. What I want is what I need is a house. But now that I now specify the location, specify where I want the house to be located in the center, it can no longer be seen as a need, because there are certain extra things that are not necessary that I've now added unto the need that I had in the beginning. Then a demand now. There's now a difference. A demand, we are going a step further. We are saying that it is no longer just a need, it is no longer just a want, but I am backing that up with the ability to purchase. So whenever you're defining demand, there are two things. There is the willingness, i.e. the wanting part, I want it. But there is a second part, the ability, the monetary means to make the purchase. So I want a house in Durban, but does my bank account support the purchase of a house in Durban? If it does not support, then it's just a want. But if it supports, then it now transforms into demand, because there's willingness and then there's what? Then there's ability. So when demand, you're talking about demand, willingness and ability should both be there. So we have differentiated between these three things. So the importance of differentiating these three things is you will see a lot of questions that will ask you about that. But remember, in our definition of economics, we said it's about two specific issues. On one hand, with unlimited wants, and then on the other hand, we have got what? we've got scarcity. So it's not, economics is about demand and scarcity. No. But it's unlimited ones, because demand in itself is limited. Demand is limited by what? By the monetary means or the ability to purchase. But wants are unlimited in nature. That is why we say economics is about, on one hand, there's unlimited wants, and then on the other hand, there is scarcity. Now that we've talked about demand, needs, wants, and demand, let's talk on the other side, because we said it's two things. Let's talk on the other end, which is scarcity. So you may ask yourself, what is this scarcity that James is talking about? So scarcity refers to the limited nature of the resources that exist, which results in limited availability of goods and services. So there are, you guys are managers and etc. at your different companies, so I'm sure you understand the language of input, process, and output. So there are inputs that you need for you to process something, or for you to produce something. For you to produce a car, you are going to need the rubber for the wheels. You are going to need the metal for the, for the body. You are going to need some electronics and chips for the computer, computer in the engine, and etc. And then you're going to need a lot of various inputs. Then it's going to go through a process, a production process. Then when the production process is done, at the very end, there is output. And the output is the car, which we can say it's a commodity, or it's a good, or it's a service, whatever you consider it to be. So there is input, process, and output. So whenever we're talking about scarcity, we are saying that resources, i.e. the inputs that are needed in a production process for us to have cars, for us to have houses, for us to have cell phones, for us to have food, those inputs are limited in nature. And because they are limited in nature, therefore we can say that resources are scarce, which means that the goods and services that are going to be produced are also going to be limited. So I hope that is very, 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 very clear. So scarcity is about the limited nature of the resources that are needed for us to what? To produce various goods and various services. So I think after explaining that, you now have a clear definition of what economics, or the study of economics, is all about. So in summary, the study of economics is a social science that studies human behavior in the context of the relationship between unlimited wants and limited resources, or scarce resources within a specific setup, or within a specific country. Now, when we are studying economics, there are two branches of economics that we are going to study. So for your course, this one specifically, you are studying microeconomics. Then there is another course that you're going to do, I think in the next semester, which is Economics 10B, where you're going to study macroeconomics. So microeconomics with an I is the study of the individual elements of economics, whereas macroeconomics with an A is the study of the aggregated behavior of economic agents within an economy. Let me explain further. So when we're saying micro and we're saying individual, we're saying that there are particular agents. When I say agents or economic agents, I'm referring to you as an individual. I'm referring to me as an individual. I'm referring to Pick and Pay as a business. I'm referring to Sanlam as a business. So those are the various economic agents that we have. And these economic agents are going to make decisions. I'm going to make a decision whether to buy a television or not. The Pick and Pay is going to make a decision whether to produce a specific product or not to sell that specific product. Those are the decisions that they're going to make. So the study of these individual decisions is what microeconomics is all about. So we're going to be looking at the price of a cell phone. We're going to be looking at the demand of a cell phone by James. So that's microeconomics. We are going to be looking at the decision of Pick and Pay to enter into a specific industry or not. We're going to be looking at the production costs that Pick and Pay faces as a company. That's microeconomics. We're going to be looking at the market structure in which Pick n Pay operates. Is it in a monopoly market structure? Is it in a perfectly competitive market structure? So that's all microeconomics. But when we switch over to macroeconomics, it becomes different. It's now aggregated behavior. We are no longer looking at James as an individual, but we are now looking at all the households within the specific country of South Africa. We're going to look at what we call aggregated demand. Aggregated demand is the demand of all the households in South Africa. So that's what we are looking at the macroeconomic level. We are going to be looking at the general price level. Instead of the price of a cell phone, we are now saying that let's combine the prices of everything in South Africa and come up with one price. And that price is going to be called inflation. If you've heard the term, we should say inflation. That's the price of everything in South Africa. So if they say that inflation rate is 4.5%, what they're basically saying that the price of everything in South Africa increased by 4.5% from last year to this year. So that's an aggregated thing. You can look at unemployment. Unemployment is, we are looking at everywhere. Of the 55 million people in South Africa, how many are unemployed? That's at an aggregated level. So that is the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics. Micro, individual, macro, aggregated level. I hope that's very clear. So then the second thing, now we've differentiated between these two branches. So the second thing is that when you're studying economics also, there are two types of economics that you're going to study, or two types of theories that you're going to face in economics. So there is what we call positive economics, and there's what we call normative economics. When you are saying that economics is positive, you are saying that economics is factual. You are saying that there is cause and there is effect in economics. You are talking about the development of various theories that make up the economic fraternity. You're talking about scientific, very, very objective facts of economics. For example, saying that the inflation rate of South Africa for 2020 was 4.5%, that is positive economics, because that's objective, that's factual, that's measurable. You can say that the unemployment rate for South Africa last year was 29%. That's positive economics. That's very, very factual. You can say that all these various, you can even the law of demand, we'll talk about it later, where you're saying that if the price increases, the quantity demanded will decrease. That's a theory, that's a law, that's in economics, that's positive, that's factual. But when you move to the other hand now, and you start talking about normative economics, you are now inputting your value judgments. You are now saying it ought to be like this. You're now saying I recommend this pathway. For example, you may say that I believe the government should increase the tax rate in what? In the alcohol industry, so that we can stop maybe you are looking at the crime rate and you're saying, no, I think crime is caused by alcohol. So if the government increases the tax rate in the industry, in the alcohol industry, then maybe the crime rate will go down. So that's definitely no longer effect. That's a value judgment that you're putting. But within that value judgment, there is a fact that is there. If you want to really track it down, what you are saying, the factual or the positive part of your fact is that if the tax rate increases, the disposable income of individuals will go down. So that's a fact. Because if you increase the tax, what someone earns is going to decline. That's mathematics. You cannot dispute that. But you are now saying, because of that mathematics, I think that they are going to cut on their alcohol consumption. What if they don't cut on their alcohol consumption? How do you know they're going to? You see, so that's now the value judgment that's going to what? That's going to come in. So you have to be very careful when you are differentiating between positive economics and normative economics. But like I said, normative economics, value judgments, recommendations, or when you see the statement, it ought to be, or what ought to be, or I think, something like that. So those are what we call now your value judgments. Okay. So we have defined economics. We've talked about the branches of economics. Then there are a couple of definitions here, but I think we've already talked about some of these definitions when we were talking about the definition of what economics is all about. So within our definition, we talked about limited resources that are there. That's what we do. And we talked about demand, we talked about needs, and we talked about wants. So we've already covered that. But in terms of limited resources, I want to go a step further and discuss with you what are these resources that we are talking about when we're talking about economics. So remember, I said that there are inputs and there is the process of production and then there are outputs. So what are the inputs to the decisions that we make as economists? What are these specific resources that are limited in nature that we're talking about? So in economics, there are 4 major resources that we talk about. Those are the only resources that we talk about in economics. What might actually happen is you might actually eventually remove the other 2 and only talk about 2. But there are 4 resources that we can talk about. The first resource is what we call, okay, let's just put the slide there so that you guys can also see. The first resource is what we call the land. The second resource is what we call economic capital. The third resource is labor. And the fourth resource is entrepreneurship. So when we are talking about land, we are talking about all the different natural resources that exist. Whether those natural resources are the soil itself, the land itself, whether it involves the actual gold, minerals, so to say, that is within the land itself, or whether it's the trees, the grass, the forests that are on top of the land itself, or is the wind, the sun, the water, all those various natural resources, they are all part of what we call land. So this is usually called a primary factor of our production. Then the next factor of production that you have, let's talk about another primary factor of production, which is labor. Labor is basically encompasses of 2 things. It encompasses, number 1, the physical ability of individuals to work. That is your ability to lift things, your ability to move things around, and the intellectual capacity of people. So you are now talking about your engineers, you're now talking about your actual scientists, you're now talking about your data scientists. Their intellectual capacity is also included as part of labor. Then labor sometimes is also referred as to human capital. So those 2, land and labor, are what we call primary factors of production. Now, in addition to land and labor, there is also what we call economic capital and entrepreneurship. Economic capital refers to anything that is manufactured in order to assist within our production process. So remember, we said inputs, production process, and outputs. So the production process, most of the time, it needs it's the wrong word to use. You can say maybe a lubricant, or it needs something that's going to assist it to happen. So if the assistance comes in form of a tractor, that tractor is going to be called economic capital. If assistance comes in the form of a combined harvester at a farm, that combined harvester is going to be called economic capital. If that assistance comes in the form of a delivery truck for a company that does warehousing and etc., that delivery truck is now considered what? Economic capital. So economic capital is anything that is manufactured that aids in production. Now, the important part here is to differentiate it from what we call financial capital. Financial capital is not a factor of production. Financial capital is asked to purchase these various things, but it is not a factor of production. Financial capital, in other words, is also known as money. So whenever you see a question asking, is money a factor of production, or at least factors of production, and there is money there, that question, that thing is wrong, because money or financial capital is not part of the factors of production. You have to see the word economic capital or just capital. That will be okay. If it just says capital, it's fine, or it says economic capital, it's fine. But the moment it says financial capital, that's wrong, because that's not part of the factors of production. Then the last factor of production that we have is what we call entrepreneurship schemes. Entrepreneurship, basically, you're saying that who is going to combine or organize land, capital, and labor in the production process to provide us with the various outputs. So that is what entrepreneurial ability represents. So if it lacks, which means that the processes that you're going to have are Who's going to do them? Who's going to be that efficient? Who's going to bring in, who's going to take the risk to be involved in the various businesses that are there? So those are our 4 factors of production. Okay, we'll go back to our definitions. So I think we are done with limited resources here. Then scarcity, I think scarcity, I've already explained what scarcity is all about, where I said that it's about the limited nature of our resources. Then the next definition now is opportunity cost. Now, opportunity cost is enshrined in what we call trade-offs, or in the relationship between unlimited ones and scarcity. So you have unlimited ones, I have unlimited ones. I want a cell phone. I want to buy a laptop. I also want to buy a Samsung television. All of these 3 things are costing 10,000 Rand on the market. Let's say it's an iPhone, it's an expensive phone, or it's a Samsung S whatever. So all these 3 things are costing 10,000 Rand on the market. But because of the limited nature of resources, I also have got a limited salary that I have. So my salary is probably, let's say, 10,000 Rand also. So because I have got a salary of 10,000 Rand, I have to make a choice. I have to make a choice between the 3 things. So I'm going to choose, I'm going to buy a cell phone. So there is a cost that is accrued to me as an individual. So the same principle applies also to an economy. So we have a limited amount of land as a country, right? Let's not even talk about others. Let's just talk about land. We've got a limited amount of land. And of that limited amount of land, only a portion of it is arable. So as a country, we have to make a choice. Are we going to produce wheat? Are we going to produce maize meal? Are we going to do beef, cattle ranching? Which are we going to choose? So when we say as a country, we are going to be the best producers of fruits, we have forgone other products that we would have farmed on the land that we have. So that is going to be our opportunity cost. But when you're dealing with opportunity cost now, it's not only about what has been forgone after you've made a choice, but you want to identify what was the next best alternative from the choices that I have made. So let's go back to my example. I said I want to buy a cell phone, an iPhone, and a cell phone. All right, let's just change it. I think I've forgotten what I was talking about. Let's say I want to buy a printer and a television set. Those are the 2 things that I want to buy. But in addition, I'm also thinking, you know what? I also need a couple of chairs in my house. And then you start valuing these things, and you find that the value of the printer is 5,000 Rand. The value of the cell phone is 5,000 Rand. But the value of the chairs is 2,000 Rand, which means that the chairs don't have the same value or are not as valuable as the printer and as the cell phone. So when I make the choice of buying the cell phone, the chairs are not an opportunity cost. What is the opportunity cost is the printer, the thing that was valued at the same value with the cell phone. So the next best alternative, what was the next best thing that you could have done with the similar amount of money or with the similar amount of resources? Again, if you go to farming, you can use the similar mechanism, but I think too many examples I'll be using because of our time. So that is what opportunity cost is about. So if you are defining opportunity cost, you're saying that opportunity cost is the cost or the value of the next best alternative that has been forgone in the choices that we make because of our scarcity. So I think that covers us there. Then another, you see, we're covering a lot of different definitions. That's why I said this topic is important because it gives you the best of what economics is all about. Then you start going into the different theories and etc. when you have the best. So again, you need to talk about goods, services, resources, and etc. I think we've already covered the part about resources. We don't need to do that. But let's talk about goods. Goods and services. So when we are speaking economics, you see a lot of the time we say the demand of a good or the demand of a commodity, and etc. What we need to know is that when we say this is an economic good in economics, it refers to either a good or a service or a commodity. It could be a car or a bank account or a health service that you are going to receive. So it refers to any plethora of all those things. So that's an economic good. But the reason why we put economic in front is because you have to pay to obtain that thing. If you have to pay to obtain it, then that thing is an economic good. And the reason why we pay for things is because things are scarce. So when something is not scarce, sometimes it's no longer an economic good. It's now referred to as a free good. So free goods are goods and services that you as a consumer can obtain for free because the resources are abundant. So the question may come now and ask you, would you consider health, free education a free good? It's in the name, it's free education. Would you consider it a free good? So in essence, yes, education, free education is a free good because you're obtaining it for free. But at certain points in time, you cannot consider it as a free good because there is a cost, a hidden cost that is attached to it. The hidden cost is the taxes that you are going to pay as a citizen because that free education is not free. You are paying for it through taxes. And then from the taxes, the government is going to sponsor that free education. So at a certain point in time, some of the goods that are called free goods are actually not free goods. Although we say they're free goods, they're actually not free goods because there is a hidden cost or a hidden element to them. Why? Because of scarcity. The resources are not abundantly available. But there are certain things like the air that we breathe. You can say air is that's definitely all the way it's free. It's a free good, and etc. But the same question can be asked: what about the oxygen in the hospital? Is it not the same air that we breathe? So at a certain point in time, free goods might not be free goods, although we term them free goods. Okay, I hope that's clear. So that's economic goods and free goods. I didn't include this in my notes, but let's just type it in. We can also talk about what we call consumer goods versus what we call capital goods. So when we're talking about consumer goods, we're talking about goods for consumption, for direct current consumption. Let's use the word current consumption. So example of a consumer good is going to McDonald's and purchasing a burger and eating it, or going to game and purchasing your refrigerator and putting it home, plugging it into the wall and consuming. Whether it's durable or non-durable, it doesn't really matter. It's still part of consumer goods. They are goods that you purchase for the purpose of consuming it right now. But there is a difference now with capital goods. Capital goods are goods that are used now for production of other goods. They are used in the production process. Remember, we said 4 factors of production. One of them is capital. So from that name capital, we now say these goods fall into that category of capital goods. That's what basically we are talking about. I don't think I need to explain it anymore other than that. So, your tractor is a capital good because you purchase it for the purposes of producing, for farming purposes. So that's a capital good. Then you can also, okay, let's add some more notes here. We can also talk about, we said what consumer goods and capital goods. We can also talk about intermediate goods, goods versus final or finished goods. Final or finished goods. So bread, for example, is a final good, but wheat is an intermediate good because you don't consume wheat, you don't eat wheat. The only thing you use wheat to do is to produce other things. Whether they're going to produce alcohol with the wheat or whether they're going to produce bread with the wheat, but you have to produce something with the wheat. So wheat is an intermediate good. It's within the process of production. It's being sold somewhere. How many tons of wheat? It's a good, yes, but it's an intermediate good. But the final good is goods that no longer need any additional production to them. So I hope that's very clear. Yeah, that's good. So this becomes now the end of the introduction to what economics is all about. So after knowing all this, you are now able to talk about what economics is all about. But now the next topic that you immediately meet after you've discussed about this is now what we call the production possibility case, or the theory of the PPC. Now the theory of the PPC is, now remember what I said, what we talked about is the basis. Now we are going to go into the theories. So we're going to talk about the theory of the PPC. We're going to talk about the cyclical flow of income. That's another theory. And then we're going to talk about the theory of demand and supply. And then we're going to talk about the theory of production costs. And then we're going to talk about the theory of market structures. Then I'm not sure I haven't checked that part in the module about labor, whether you guys cover labor, but I'll check it when we get there. So those are the various theories that we are now going to talk about based on the information that we've introduced. So we still have time here. So I will cover the theory of our production, production possibility curve, and also maybe the theory of the circular flow of income. So that at least if we cover that, next week we know we are now getting into demand and supply. Okay. So the theory of the PPC, or what we call the production possibility curve, or sometimes it's also referred as the some examiners like production possibility frontier. So it's now PPF, production possibility frontier. So the production possibility curve, or the production possibility frontier, is basically just a graph, right? It's just a graph with a curve on it, which just represents all the things that we're talking about. It represents opportunity cost, it represents scarcity, it represents the various resources, it represents the goods. All these various things that we've introduced can all be summarized into one specific graph. Okay. So this is what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start from scratch, and then I'm going to show you how it's plotted, and then we can then go to the diagram that I already have. So if, okay, sorry. Okay. So if you are asked now to prepare a production possibility frontier, or a production possibility curve, usually it comes in theory questions where saying, using the production possibility frontier, can you please illustrate the relationships between scarcity, opportunity, and choices, or economic growth, or something like that? So this is what you need to know. The first thing is you're going to make assumptions. So that's important. The assumption that you're going to make is that you are operating in a closed economy. A closed economy and open economy, I'm going to define. Open economy simply means that South Africa, the economy that is South Africa, is practicing international trade with other countries like Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique, and etc. That's what an open economy means. But a closed economy means that they don't have international trade. Whatever is happening, they produce and consume within the borders. So that's the first assumption that you're going to make. Then the second assumption, because remember your graph is only two axes, an x-axis and a y-axis, which means that you only have two things that you can include. So you're going to remove everything else and say that in this country, there are only two types of things that are going to be produced. So there are either two goods that are going to be produced, or some lecturers like saying capital goods and then consumer goods. But you can just choose any goods. You can say bananas and apples. You can say cell phones and computers, cars and food, or something like that. You can just choose any two goods that you want. So those are the assumptions that you're going to make. Number one, closed economy. Number two, there are only two goods that are going to be produced within this specific closed economy. And then you state what those two goods are. Then the third one, it's not an assumption, because remember we said that there are only four factors of production that are going to be used within any specific economy. But you can also highlight that the factors of production in this economy are your land, your capital, your labor, and your entrepreneurial ability. Now, any graph, we said it has got two axes. So this is your what? Your y-axis, the horizontal line, and this is your what? Your x-axis, the vertical line. Then any graph with the x-axis and the y-axis, we assume that there is a 0 here where the two are going to meet. Okay, so on your axis, you're now going to put the two goods that you have selected. For example, let's assume that we are going to produce wheat in this country. That's good number 1. So on one axis, you're going to put wheat. Now on your axis now, the wheat is not in dollars, it's in quantities produced by the country. How much wheat is going to be produced? We can speak in terms of tons here. So it could be 1 ton produced, 2 tons produced, 10 tons produced, 100 tons produced by South Africa. It doesn't really matter. We say then it's wheat that is going to be produced. Then on the other axis, the vertical axis, we put it. You can vice versa, it's all up to you. It doesn't really matter. On the other axis here, you're going to put the other good. Let's say instead of wheat, South Africa can produce, let's say, computers, or let's just say machines. They can produce machines. Let's just make it arbitrary and say either they produce wheat or they produce machines. So we now have the two goods and services that can be produced in South Africa. Now that we have these things, now let's go a step further because we want to create this production possibility curve. Now remember what we said, that there are 4 factors of production, but these factors of production are limited, which means that you cannot say we can produce infinity amount of wheat. There is a limited amount of wheat that can be produced by South Africa. So let's say that the limit is 5 million tons of wheat that they can produce. So if South Africa can produce 5 million tons of wheat using all the resources in the country, everyone, 55 million people are now working in the farms. The whole land is used for farming. The whole capital is for tractors and etc. for farming. The whole entrepreneurs are doing farming to produce wheat. This is what we are going to do as a country. So when we do that as a country, what's now going to happen is we can come here and say at this point here, right? They're going to be what? 5 million tons of wheat. The reason why I put this point here is, remember on the machine side, we said we're using all our resources. So on the machine side, it has to be 0 because all the resources are going towards what? Are going towards the wheat. So it has to be 0 on the machine side. Everything is being used to produce the what? The wheat. On the other hand, we might make a different what? A different choice and say, no, we want to produce machines. So how many machines can we produce using all the land, all the labor, all the resources that are there? We can assume that maybe we can produce what? 15. Let's say 15,000. That's what we are going to what? Assume. So we come here and we put what? 15K. So that's basically what we are now what? What we are now saying we are going to what? To produce. Now, any rational country is not going to produce all machines or all wheat. They might choose to make a combination. Let's use some of the resources for wheat. Let's use some of the resources for machines. So when we make these various decisions, we're going to end up here, maybe somewhere here, maybe another choice is here, maybe another choice is here, maybe another choice is here. Let's explain these choices. I'll just take one example. Okay, what's happening now? Okay, draw. So here, if we make this choice here, what we're basically saying, this is almost halfway. So we can say maybe here there's 7, and this is almost 3/4 of the way. We can say yes, there's 4. So we're saying that we're producing 7,000. We're producing 7K in machines here, and 4 million in what? In wheat over here. So that's basically what we're saying for this specific choice. But remember, we said that there are different choices. So the PPC, or the curve that we're talking about, is the line that then combines these various choices that we have made as a country. Okay, so let's clear that. I think that's self-explanatory. Let's clear that. Let's delete this. We don't need it anymore. Delete and delete. Okay. Right. So this is what we're going to end up with. Don't worry, don't get confused. I'm going to explain. But in short, the production possibility curve represents the maximum amount of goods or services that can be produced using all the resources that are available. So remember what we said when I was explaining here. I said that if we use all the resources, we get what? We get 5 million tons of wheat. If we use all the resources, we get what? 15,000 machines. Or if we use a combination and say we use all the resources, we can come here at point B. At point B, we're getting what? 14,000 in terms of the machines and 1 million in terms of the tons of wheat that we are producing. But we are using all the resources. So any point on this PPC represents usage or full utilization of all the resources that are in the country. Now, let's go back to our definition where we're talking about scarcity. So if I then come to you and say, what about point C over here? Therefore, point C over here, or maybe even let's put another here, point, let's say this is now point what? Point H. There's no H, right? Anyway, yeah. We can say this is now point H over here. This means that using all the resources, I cannot produce point H. Why? Because when I used all the resources, this is the line that I got. Anything outside the line of the PPC represents scarcity. So to define scarcity using the graph, you just have to draw a line, put a point outside the PPC and point to it and say this point represents scarcity. Because it's outside the PPC, it's outside the resources that are available within the specific country. But if the resources increase, right? If the land increases, if the labor increases, if the capital increases, if the entrepreneurial ability increases, then there's going to be economic growth within that country. And we can now see this dotted line here. It represents an increase in the resources so that we get to point C. So a movement of the PPC outwards or to the right represents economic growth. So if you're asked, how do you represent economic growth on the PPC? Just draw another line on the right. That line represents economic growth because there's been a change or a movement or an increase in the what? In the resources of that specific country. Okay, we've explained 2 points over here. What about point P, which is inside here? So we said on the line, it's full utilization of the resources, which means that if you're at point C, you are not utilizing all the resources. There are some resources that are lying idle, that are not being utilized. Let's give you an example. Let's say that at this point over here, P, you are getting 6,000 machines and what? And 3K in what? In wheat. You're getting 3 million tons of wheat. But still maintaining 6,000 machines, you can also get what? 4 tons. It's still possible to get 4 tons. So you are getting 3 tons, but you can also get 4 tons here at point E. But still, you don't have to sacrifice any machine. There is no opportunity cost. But we talked about opportunity cost and said that's important in economics. It arises because of scarcity. So if there's no opportunity cost, there's no scarcity. But it simply means that there are resources that are lying idle. There are some people that were at home that were not working, that you have employed to produce the extra 1 million ton of what? Of the wheat that is now being produced. So from that point over here, we can say this represents unemployment or underutilization of the resources. And also explaining, just deriving from the same concept, any movement along the PPC from A to B to Q over here to D to E represents a choice that we have to make because of scarcity. But remember what we said, any choices that we are making because of scarcity are what we call opportunity cost. So by foregoing E to make F, we are now saying E is the opportunity cost that we are going to suffer. So if you want to represent opportunity cost on the PPC, you just draw a couple of points and say this is A, this is B, this is E, this is whatever. As you move along, you are making choices, and those choices are resulting in what? In opportunity cost. P cannot be an opportunity cost. Why? Because P is not the next best alternative for gone. But A is the next best alternative for gone for B. D is the next best alternative for gone for E. So anything on the PPC represents opportunity cost, but anything within, no, that's not PPC, that's not opportunity cost, that's underutilization of resources. I hope I am very clear on that. So those are some of the various concepts. Then also using the PPC, you can even go further and explain another point. Now you can see that my PPC here has got a nice bell shape. It is a curve. I could have drawn a straight line here like this. But that straight line is not true. It would be a lie when we're talking in economics. So that curve in the PPC represents a certain theory or a certain assumption. Remember, I talked about positive economics and whatnot. It represents a certain assumption. The assumption that is there is that resources are not equally usable for particular goods and services. So because of that, there's what we call increasing opportunity costs. I'll give you an example. So when you are producing machines, you're going to need land, you're going to need labor, you're going to need entrepreneurial capacity, you're going to need what was the other one? Capital. But under land, we said that there is trees, there is air, there is sea, and etc. Is everything under land really applicable in the production of machines? Probably not. Some of those issues are not really applicable. Maybe you need the land to set the factories, but do you really need the sea? Probably you don't need it, and etc. But as you move from the land, let's just assume you have used everything. As you move from the land to the wheat, as you move from the machine, to the wheat, you're going to say, let's take all the land and put it towards the wheat. And all the farmers are going to say, hallelujah, that's okay. Let's take all the labor and put it to the wheat. All the farmers say, hallelujah, that's okay. And etc. as you go forward. But you're going to face a challenge. Within your land, there is gold. Gold can be used to produce machines, for example. You use gold. Gold is used, gold, I think, in platinum is used in the production of microchips. So it's important in the production of machines. But is gold important to the wheat producer? No, it's not. So you're going to end up with, let's now take the gold as a metal and use it to produce maybe some engine parts for the combine harvester and etc. So it's no longer, you are underutilizing the gold. It's becoming expensive. You've got a tractor that is costing $1 million to make because it's made out of gold, but it's going to produce the same amount of wheat that the tractor produced by the what? By the iron or by the copper of that specific region. So as you transform resources from machine production to wheat production, you are going to get to an extent where it's going to be expensive to transform these resources. Hence why I said all resources are not equally useful in the production of other goods that you are producing. Hence, increasing opportunity cost. I sometimes I'm not able to explain it clearly, but I hope this explanation was very clear to you all. Okay. So I think I have explained everything on production. On PPC, let's see if there's anything that I've left out. Utilization, unemployment, choices, efficiency. Okay, I didn't talk about that one. I'll explain in a minute. Then increasing opportunity costs. So increasing opportunity costs is the bell curve. That's what we're talking about. Efficiency, I talked about it, but I didn't go much deeper into it. When I said underutilization of resources, and I said anything that is within the PPC, it's underutilization of the resources. Anything that is on the PPC, that's full utilization of resources. That also represents what we call Pareto or production efficiency. In case you've got an examination, what says what is Pareto efficiency or what is production efficiency? It's when you are producing on the PPC. Basically, that's it. So that's the PPC for you guys. I think the last concept on the PPC is the movement of the PPC, i.e. that dotted line over there. So the PPC is not stationary. Over time, it can change. Why? For example, we said 4 things: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. The population of South Africa is always increasing over time. We started at 45, we are now at 55, we are going to 65, and etc. So as the population increases, what happens is the labor available in the industries is also going to increase. But we said labor is the factor of production. So as the labor increases, we are also able to produce more goods and services. So as the resources, whether those resources are land or labor and etc., increase, the PPC is going to shift outwards. It's going to move to the right. So that's going to be a shift in the whole PPC. But what might happen in a specific economy, second example, is that the PPC might just shift on one side, a swivel. When I mean a swivel, I mean, look at this thing here. This is the initial PPC, right? But if you look on this end, it did not move. But on this end, it moved from 13 to what? To 19. So why might a PPC swivel just on one end, just a swivel on one end? The reason for this is what we call improvement in the utilization of technologies or in the techniques used in production. So we're saying that this specific country produces apples and cell phones. And then in a specific year, they now have got a new, amazing technology that they can use to produce their cell phones cheaply or to produce more cell phones. So just because of that technology, they can produce more cell phones using similar amount of resources, using the same land, using the same labor, using the same capital, and etc. That's an innovation that has happened, an improvement in technology or a technique. So the PPC will swivel, but it does not affect apples because the production of apples has nothing to do with the production of cell phones. They use completely different methods in terms of their production. Yes, the resources are similar, but the techniques or the methods of production are completely different. So it will remain the same amount of apples using the resources that we have. So this brings us to the end of the topic on PPC. So how much time did we spend? That's an hour. Okay, that's good. I was budgeting 2 hours. So we've finished PPC. Okay, we can go into the next theory. The next theory that we have here is now, it's still part of the introduction phase, but it's what we call economic questions. What are the economic problems, or what are the economic questions that may exist? So after you've studied the introduction of economics, after you've talked about the PPC, you might ask yourself further, why do we really need to study economics? That's the question that might be having as a student. Is it really important? Now, the reason why we want to study economics is because of what we call the basic economic problem. Now, I'm sure by now you can actually even guess what the basic economic problem is all about. The basic economic problem is how does society solve the problem of what? Of unlimited wants and limited resources that exist within that specific economy. That's the basic economic problem. Now, there are 3 questions that arise from the basic economic problem, which now will create the various theories and studies and topics and branches of economics that we can talk about. So these 3 questions are: what are we going to produce? How are we going to produce it? And to whom are we going to distribute what we have produced. So what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Now, let's explain further what this means. So the first question, what are we going to produce, gives rise now to the issues that we talked about earlier. It gives rise to goods and services. Now we're saying, are we going to produce goods or are we going to produce services? Are we going to produce something that is tangible or something that is intangible? Are we going to produce economic goods or are we going to produce free goods? Are we going to produce public goods or are we going to produce private goods? So there's something also called public goods and private goods. I will explain a bit later down the line. Then are we going to produce consumer goods or are we going to produce capital goods? So that's a decision that we have to make as an economy. So for example, let's take consumer goods and capital goods. So an economy is faced with that decision, for example. If they produce consumer goods, they have something to consume today. But if they produce capital goods, what's going to happen? Remember, we said capital goods are used in the production of other goods, which means that if we produce capital goods this year, next year we're able to produce more consumer goods because we now have what? We now have more capital goods. So this is why you see some of these countries are more successful than other countries because they specialize, like Japan and USA, they specialize in the production of capital goods. So those capital goods that they produce will make sure that in the following year, they can now produce more consumer goods. But if as a country you focus on producing consumer goods, then when you exhaust the resources that you have, then what are you going to consume? So those are some of the decisions that you now want to make. I'll explain something a bit down the line on how they make the decisions. But for now, just know the decision is what are we going to produce? And some of the issues I've explained here are economic goods, public goods, capital goods, and these are the various things that you are now deciding. But that's under what to produce. How to produce now? That's a different question. So how to produce? You are now saying that you have got 4 resources. How are you going to combine your land, your capital, your entrepreneurship, and your land capital and your labor? How are you going to combine these 3 things? The primary factors of production and the secondary factors of production. How are you going to use the technology that you have? How are your markets going to be done? For example, you've got your perfectly competitive market, your oligopoly market, your monopoly market. Don't worry, we'll talk about it. But there are different market structures. There are different production strategies that you're going to make. Should you produce in this industry or not? How are you going to produce the things that you decided on question number 1 you're going to produce? How are you going to make them? So that's question number 2. Then question number 3 says now, for whom to produce? For whom to produce, we're talking about distribution. You have decided we want to produce consumer good. You have decided we are going to produce this consumer good through the use of the perfectly competitive market structure, through the use of the MC is equals to MRRO. Don't worry, we'll talk about it. That's how you have decided. Then how are you going to distribute these goods and services? Who are you going to allocate them to? You're now talking about prices as a signal. In some countries, they have rationing instead of prices. That's how they're going to distribute. Those are the various theories that are income distribution, for example, public and private sector. Those are some of the things that we are now discussing under this specific bracket. So in summary, what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Now that you have discussed these 3 specific questions now, you are now left with an inkling in your mind as a student, and you ask yourself, okay, how are they going to make this specific decision? Okay, I think let's make this our last topic. I don't want to overload you guys with information. Let's see. Let's make this our last topic. Yeah, let's make this. I think we can do the other one next week, so that you're not overloaded with information. Okay. So we said that what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Now that you have asked those questions, you now want those questions answered. So there are different ways of organizing an economy in order to answer these 3 questions. Some economies are what we call traditional economies. They are no longer there. So I don't think we'll discuss about it. But there is what we call a traditional economy. Then some economies use what we call the command economy or the command system, market system, to answer those three questions. Then some use the market economy or market system to answer those three questions. Then some economies use the mixed economy to answer those three questions. So I'll explain. What is the command economy and how does it answer the three basic economic questions? So the command economy is what we know as socialism or communism. I'm sure by just stating socialism or communism, I'm sure you already have ideas in your mind about what I'm going to talk about. So the first thing that you need to know about the command system is that there usually is no private ownership of resources. There's what we call government or state ownership of the resources. So the factors of production and sometimes the businesses used in the factors of in the country are owned by the government. That's the first thing that you need to know. So in terms of how to produce, they are saying that we'll use the government to the business-owned enterprises to produce. That's how they're answering it. Then there is what we call central economic planning. So central economic planning, we're saying that there's going to be a committee that meets maybe yearly or semi-annually that's going to decide or make decisions. This committee will decide this year we are going to produce 1,000 cars, we're going to produce 10,000 cell phones, we're going to produce 1 million tons of wheat, we are going to produce 500 kgs of beef. That's what we are going to produce for this economy. So they're answering the question of what? Of what to produce. So there is a central planning committee that exists that sets the production goals of the country. Then, and this, when they have done that, they can also decide how they're going to distribute. They might set up a pricing system, yes, or they might set up a rationing system and say every citizen in the country will get 100 kilograms of beef each year. They will get one car every 5 years. They will get one cell phone every 3 years or something like that. So that's centrally planned. They are also deciding how to distribute through maybe rationing. So those are the decisions that they are making. Examples are North Korea and Cuba. I think those are the last examples that you can have. Our Soviet Union is no longer a command economy, it's now a free market economy. I think let's just delete it so that it's very clear. Let's just put North Korea and Cuba as examples. So there are some problems that exist, but that's for macroeconomics, that's for your second semester. So let's not talk about this. Let's just delete this part here. Let's leave it in there in case you are an avid reader, you can read, but don't worry, it's not important. I don't think it's important for emoji. If we see a question, we'll attend to it. Okay, so that's the command system. The second system is the market system. The market system is what we call capitalism, or sometimes it's called laissez-faire. So capitalism or laissez-faire, we are basically saying that in this economy, there is private ownership of resources. Remember, the other one said government ownership, but in this economy, there is private ownership of resources and business enterprises. So this is what we are actually going to talk about a lot in economics, because usually this is what they recommend to be a successful economic system. So private ownership of resources. Now, in terms of the decisions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce, they are decided through what you call there is freedom of choice and enterprises, which means that citizens are free to choose what they want. They are free to enter into the various businesses that they want. So if everyone is free to do these things, would they not be, a lot of confusion? This is producing this, this is producing this. How are we going to have good results? How are we going to have the correct things? So they are now what we call market forces and what we call price signaling, which also is called the invisible hand. The reason why it's called the invisible hand, it is the hand that is pushing everyone to produce what actually is needed in the market through the use of prices. So if something is not needed on the market, people will not demand it. That's a market force. People will not demand it. And when they choose not to demand it, the price is going to go down. And when the price goes down, producers make losses. And when producers make losses, they get out of that industry. Then production stops for that good or that service, which means that and things that are not wanted are not produced because they're not going to be are bought by what? By people. So that is what we call market forces, price signaling, and the invisible hand. Then there's what we call self-interest and profit maximization. That's on the part of what? Of the businesses. They want to maximize profit, so they're not going to do anything that is not wanted in the market. If there's a signal that is not wanted, they're going to abandon it because they want to maximize their what? Their profit. Then there's also going to be a lot of competition. Examples are Hong Kong and the US of A and Australia. So those are the examples that you're going to have for the market system. Now, the last one is what we call what is it called? The mixed economy. I'm not going to explain it because it's very simple and straightforward. The mixed economy is a combination of the market system and the command system. You're basically saying that you are using the market, but there's a lot of government intervention. So this should bring you into mind South Africa, huh? Because you're saying in South Africa, we've got prices, we've got a market system. But every once in a while, you see the government saying, no, you can't do this. No, this needs to be done. No, the price of this thing should be limited to this. We're going to tax this thing because we don't want you to buy it. We're going to block you from buying the specific goods from a different country. They are intervening. So that intervention means that we are operating in a mixed economy where the central figure is the market, but there is a government there to make sure that everything goes according to what they think is the government is the correct way of doing things. So I think, guys, this basically covers, I think, most of the introduction part. So what we are going to do next week, we are going to cover the remaining part of the introduction, which is our, what do you call it, the circular flow of income. So after we've covered the circular flow of income, we are going to do some questions together. We are going to look at the assignment questions that cover this specific topic, and also the questions in the module that are in the module that also cover this topic together, so that we can see if we've worked together from the beginning up until where we end up at. I don't want to overload you guys with information. It's in the evening, you guys are tired. So let's do circular flow of income on a different day. But I know you guys are good now. So if there are any questions that you guys have, you are free to ask at this stage. Or what you can do is you can, as you go through the video in your spare time, you can jot down your questions and you can ask them in our next lesson where we do the revision and the questions. But if there are questions right now, you're free to ask. I'm not closing it up. You're free to ask. But I think it would be better if we just do it next week when we do the other part, because it's a very short one for the circular flow of income. I think it would be like 40 minutes or something like that. And then after that, we're going to spend maybe another 40 minutes on just questions, just attempting different questions. I'll even try to look for some exam papers that cover some of the issues specifically for this part of the module, so that whatever we've done, we also just make sure that if a question comes, we are also good. So are you guys good? Dineo, are we good? Millicent, Landry, Charlotte, you can unmute yourselves. Are we good, guys? Is there anything that you need me to improve, or anything that you need me to correct? Hello? Yeah, good.
Good evening, sir. I'm good.
Yes. That's wonderful. Leandra, are we good?
Yes, all good, thank you.
Okay. Lisa, are we good?
Yes, I was asking if we will get notes for this lesson, maybe on our emails.
Yes, okay. Yes. I will send in the group, but if you want me to send in the email, you can just send me your email in the group. I will just also send you email if you want to see, but I will send everything in the group, the notes and the video. Charlotte, are we good?
I'm good, yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Okay, guys, let's have a pleasant evening. The video, either I'll send later tonight or tomorrow in the morning, because it has to upload in my Google Drive. It takes time sometimes, but I'll send the video later tonight or tomorrow morning. Then the notes I'll send immediately right now. So let's all, during the week, just find some time to go through the video so that you can see if there are any challenges. Jot down your questions, then you can ask them in our next lecture. So next lecture, like I said, we're covering circular flow of income, and then we are also going to go through the questions that are in the assignment and that are in the module that cover what we have covered today. Then after we're done, then we can move to the next chapter, which is the law of demand and supply. That's a completely separate thing altogether. That's why I want us to do questions first, so that we know we are finished with this introduction part. Then we can go into various theories. Okay. Thank you, guys. Have a pleasant evening.